Watch before deleted. Curious if I'm not wearing anything underneath, she whispered. It was a quiet evening on Earth, the kind of peaceful night that people took for granted before the world changed. The sky was clear, with a faint red hue as the sun slowly dipped below the horizon. In the distance, the sound of waves crashing against the shore was the only thing breaking the silence. But this peace, like all others, would not last. Captain Ava West stood on the rooftop of the massive fortress-like building in the city of New York. Her dark brown hair whipped in the evening wind, and her sharp green eyes scanned the horizon, searching for signs of the invasion she had been warned about. The last few weeks had been full of strange, unexplainable events, disappearances, weird weather patterns, and strange lights in the sky. But none of that prepared her for what was coming. The world had always been divided. Nations fought, leaders made decisions that changed the course of history, and everyday people tried to live their lives in the middle of it all. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Ava was part of the Earth Defense Force, EDF, an elite group of soldiers tasked with protecting the planet from any threat, foreign or otherwise. She had seen countless battles, fought in wars that stretched across the globe, but the rumors circulating now were unlike anything she had ever imagined. Alien forces, sent by a race known only as the Zinker, were planning to invade Earth. They were coming, and humanity had no idea how to stop them. As the sky darkened, Ava's communicator buzzed in her ear. She pressed a button on her wristwatch, activating the holographic display. A familiar face appeared on the screen, General Marcus Silva, the leader of the EDF. "Ava, we've got a situation," Marcus said. His voice was calm, but there was an underlying urgency. "The Zinker fleet has entered Earth's orbit. We don't have much time." Ava's heart skipped a beat. The Zinker were ruthless conquerors who had already destroyed several planets. The reports about their technology were horrifying. They could obliterate entire cities with a single blast, and their soldiers were said to be nearly invincible. "We're ready to deploy the countermeasures," Ava replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "How much time do we have?" "Hours," Marcus said. "But it's not enough. We need you to lead the charge. The enemy is getting closer. And we have one advantage. Our scientists have developed a prototype weapon, something that can level the playing field. We need you to bring it online and launch it before they land." Ava nodded, her mind racing. This was it, the moment that humanity would either rise or fall. She had been trained for this, but nothing could fully prepare her for the weight of this responsibility. The future of the world rested in her hands. "Understood, General," she said firmly. "I'll make sure it gets done." "Good, time is running out. Get to the weapon lab, Ava. It's our only shot." With the communication cut, Ava turned away from the rooftop, her expression hardening. She quickly activated her wristwatch again, sending a signal to her team. In moments, her fellow soldiers were gathered, suited up in their battle gear and ready for action. Each one of them was a specialist in their own right: snipers, engineers, medics, and heavy weapons experts. They all knew the stakes. Ava scanned the group, her gaze briefly resting on each soldier. They were all quiet, focused. No words were needed. They knew what had to be done. "Let's move out," Ava ordered. The team made their way down the stairs of the building, through the corridors that led to the EDF's underground base. The air was thick with tension, but Ava kept her focus on the task ahead. They reached the elevator, which shot them down into the depths of the base, where the secret weapon was housed. As the doors opened, they entered the lab, a high-tech facility filled with monitors, machinery, and scientists working around the clock. At the center of the room was a massive, silver chamber that hummed with energy. It was the weapon they had been working on for months, a device that could turn the tide of battle in humanity's favor. But would it be enough? A scientist named Dr. Clara Hinson stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "Captain West, we're almost ready to activate the weapon. It's designed to disrupt the Zinker's technology, but we're not sure how they'll react to it. It could be a game changer or it could backfire. Ava nodded, stepping closer to the chamber. We don't have the luxury of testing it. We deploy it now or Earth falls. Dr. Henson gave a small, worried nod and began typing on the console in front of her. The chamber hummed louder, and a bright blue light began to pulse from within. Outside, the first Zinker ships broke through Earth's atmosphere, their massive forms blocking out the stars. They looked like jagged mountains in the sky, black, unyielding, and enormous. Their weaponry glowed with an ominous energy and their warships were bristling with firepower. Ava could almost feel the ground shake as they landed. In the lab, Ava's team stood at the ready, weapons drawn. The time had come. Doctor. Henson finished entering the final commands, and the chamber before them pulsed with a deafening roar. "Weapon is online," Dr. Henson announced. "You're good to go, Captain." Ava didn't hesitate. She turned to her team and gave a sharp, determined nod. "Let's give them hell." The fate of humanity hung in the balance. The world outside the EDF base was in chaos. The skies had turned black as the first of the Zinker ships descended, their colossal forms blocking out the stars. The entire city seemed to tremble under their immense weight. Everywhere people were running in fear, trying to escape what they knew was coming. It felt like the end of everything, but for Captain Ava West, it was just the beginning of humanity's fight to survive. Ava's team, heavily armed and ready, stood in the underground lab, listening to the rumbling sounds of the enemy fleet. The warships' engines screeched like beasts in pain as they slowed down, hovering above the Earth's surface. The silence in the lab was deafening, broken only by the sound of the humming weapon in front of them. Ava turned to face her team. Their faces were grim, but their eyes burned with determination. They were about to face a battle like no other, and they knew this could be their last stand. "We move out now," Ava said, her voice steady and confident. "We have to launch the weapon before they get too close. We don't have time to wait." Her team nodded in unison, each one moving to their assigned positions. The mission was clear: reach the launch site, activate the weapon, and stop the Zinker invasion before it was too late. Ava and her squad sprinted through the maze of underground corridors, their boots echoing in the silence. Outside, the Zinker ships were getting closer. The ground was shaking, and a low hum filled the air. Ava could feel her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to stay calm. Fear wouldn't help them now. They needed to fight. As they emerged from the underground base, the sight that greeted them was nothing short of terrifying. The Zinker warships had landed across the city. Giant metal structures now dominated the skyline, casting long shadows over the streets. Soldiers in black armor, their faces hidden beneath menacing helmets, were already disembarking. They were preparing for a ground invasion. "We need to move fast," Ava ordered. "Stay in formation. Watch your six." The team spread out, moving quickly but carefully, staying low and using the rubble of destroyed buildings for cover. They could see the Zinker soldiers marching in formation, their weapons raised and ready. It was clear that the invasion was not just about conquering Earth. It was about exterminating every living thing in their way. Ava checked her wristwatch. The weapon had to be launched in the next 15 minutes. She could only hope that the Zinker didn't know about it yet. As they neared the main launch site, a distant rumble shook the ground again, followed by a massive explosion. A nearby building collapsed, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Ava's squad immediately ducked for cover. "Stay low," Ava shouted. "We've been spotted." From the cloud of dust, figures began to emerge, Zinker soldiers, their glowing eyes scanning the area for any sign of life. They were closing in fast. Ava held up a hand, signaling for her team to halt. She crouched down behind a concrete pillar, peering around it to take a look. There were 5 Zinker soldiers advancing, their weapons ready. Ava's heart raced, but she knew they had no choice but to engage. "On my mark, we take them down." she whispered to her team. Her squad nodded, their faces set with determination. Ava watched the soldiers as they drew nearer, their heavy boots pounding against the ground. When they were just a few feet away, she gave the signal. Now, the team sprang into action. A hail of gunfire rang out, the sound deafening in the quiet of the city. Ava's sniper, Jake, took the first shot, a clean hit to one of the Zinkers' heads. The alien soldier collapsed to the ground, lifeless. The other soldiers returned fire, their weapons crackling with energy. But Ava's team was fast, moving with the precision of well-trained warriors. They didn't miss. Within seconds, 2 more Zinker soldiers were down, their bodies crumpling to the pavement. But the remaining 2 soldiers were still firing, their weapons sending deadly blasts of energy in all directions. Ava dove behind another pillar for cover as the blasts rained down around her. "We're not done yet," she shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "Take them out." Her engineer, Sarah, tossed a grenade, and it exploded in a flash of light, sending a shockwave through the area. The last 2 Zinker soldiers were knocked off their feet, their weapons scattering. In that split second, the team closed in. With a few precise shots, the remaining aliens were no longer a threat. Panting and covered in sweat, Ava looked at her team. They had fought hard and fast, but they couldn't afford to waste any more time. "Good work, everyone." "Let's move," she said, her voice still steady despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins. They continued forward, now even closer to the launch site. But as they moved, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air felt too still, the silence too unnatural. She glanced around but saw nothing out of the ordinary, just more Zinker soldiers marching in the distance. They reached the launch site, a fortified bunker hidden beneath the city. The large metal door was locked, but Ava knew exactly what to do. She punched in the code, and the door slid open with a loud hiss. Inside was a control room, filled with computers and blinking lights. At the center was the massive console that would activate the weapon. Dr. Henson's voice came through Ava's communicator. "Captain West, you're almost there. You have the weapon's launch codes. Just enter them and you'll be able to activate it." Ava nodded as she sat down at the console and began typing in the codes. Her fingers moved quickly, the screen flashing with each input. As she worked, the sound of Zinker soldiers grew louder outside. They were getting closer. Ava could hear their heavy footsteps approaching. She had no time to waste. With a final press of a button, the system began to hum. The lights inside the room flickered and a high-pitched tone rang through the speakers. "It's working," Ava said, relief flooding her chest. But just as quickly, her eyes widened. The ground beneath her feet began to shake. "Captain," Dr. Henson's voice crackled in her ear. "They've detected the weapon. You have to launch it now or it'll be too late." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She had to act fast. "Everyone get ready," she shouted. "This is it." The countdown to launch had begun, and the team prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of humanity. The Zinker would stop at nothing to prevent them from activating the weapon, but Ava knew they couldn't back down. It was time to make humanity's last stand. The countdown echoed in the control room, each second stretching longer than the last. Ava's fingers hovered over the keys, sweat trickling down her forehead. The weapon was ready to fire, but she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Every second that passed brought them closer to the final confrontation. Would the Zinker stop them in time? Would humanity survive? Outside, the Zinker soldiers were closing in, their boots thudding against the cracked pavement. The sound of heavy machinery moving echoed through the city as more warships landed, their engines growling like hungry beasts. Ava could see their shadows through the thick, dirty windows of the bunker. It was now or never. 10 seconds, Dr. Henson's voice crackled in Ava's earpiece. "Captain, you have to launch the weapon now." Ava nodded, her face set in determination. "Stand by, team. Once I activate the weapon, there's no turning back. We'll have to fight our way out of here." Her squad, positioned behind various consoles and equipment, nodded silently. They all understood the gravity of the situation. There was no plan B. The weapon was their only hope. Ava entered the final code, pressing the last key with force. The screen in front of her flashed bright red, signaling the weapon was about to activate. A loud hum filled the room, growing louder with each passing second. Then, without warning, the ground shook violently. It felt as if the entire city was being torn apart. "Now!" Ava shouted, her heart racing. The room went silent except for the hum of the weapon. Then a blinding light shot out from the bunker's core, and a massive shockwave surged outward. The walls rattled and groaned under the pressure, but Ava kept her focus on the monitors in front of her. She could see the blast ripple outward across the city, as if it were cutting a path straight through the enemy forces. For a moment there was nothing but a blinding white light. Then the shockwave passed. Ava squinted, watching as the Zinker soldiers in the distance staggered and fell, their weapons disintegrating in their hands. The powerful energy from the weapon had disrupted their technology, short-circuiting their systems and knocking them out of commission. For a brief moment, it seemed like victory was within their grasp. "We did it," Ava whispered, a small sense of relief washing over her. But her victory was short-lived. "Captain, look!" Sarah, the team's engineer, shouted. She pointed to a monitor displaying a map of the city. The Zinker were regrouping quicker than expected. Even though their technology had been disabled, the enemy soldiers were still marching toward the bunker, their numbers growing by the second. It seemed the Zinker were not defeated so easily. Ava's heart sank. The weapon had worked, but the fight was far from over. "Get ready, everyone," Ava ordered. "They'll be here any minute, we're not finished yet." Just as she spoke, the loud sound of pounding footsteps filled the hallway outside the bunker. The Zinker soldiers had arrived. "Prepare for combat," Ava shouted. The squad scrambled into position, taking cover behind the heavy machinery and monitors in the control room. They loaded their weapons and checked their ammo. The Zinker were coming and they needed to be ready. Ava stood tall, her pulse steady, her mind focused. She could hear the distant roar of the enemy soldiers, growing louder as they approached. She knew the Zinker had no intention of letting them escape, no matter the cost. This would be their final stand. The door to the control room blasted open with a deafening noise. The first wave of Zinker soldiers stormed inside, weapons raised. Ava's team opened fire immediately, their guns roaring as they cut down the first few soldiers. The Zinker were strong, but they were not invincible. Ava's squad had trained for this and they fought with precision. "Keep firing, don't give them an inch," Ava shouted. Her sniper, Jake, took the lead, picking off targets one by one with expert precision. The rest of the team followed his example, laying down suppressing fire as the Zinker charged into the room. The air was filled with the crackle of energy weapons and the sharp sounds of gunfire. Ava dove behind a console, narrowly avoiding a blast from a Zinker soldier's rifle. The battle raged on, but Ava knew they couldn't hold the line forever. The Zinker were too numerous and their weapons were too powerful. But they had one advantage: the weapon. If they could just keep fighting long enough, they might be able to make it out alive. Then, just as Ava thought they were on the brink of being overrun, something unexpected happened. The hum of the weapon flared up again, and a massive surge of energy shot through the bunker. The floor shook violently beneath them, and Ava had to grab onto the console to keep her balance. "What the hell was that?" Jake shouted over the noise. "I don't know," Ava shouted back. "But I think it's working again. The weapon's still active." The enemy soldiers faltered for a moment, confusion filling their ranks. The Zinker had been expecting their technology to fail, but now they were caught off guard. Ava saw her chance. "Now's our moment," she yelled. "Push forward." With a rallying cry, the team surged forward, weapons blazing. The Zinker soldiers were disoriented, and Ava's squad was able to push them back, taking advantage of their temporary weakness. The tide of battle had turned, at least for now. Ava's pulse quickened as she scanned the room. The enemy was retreating, but there were still more of them coming. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. The weapon might have given them a chance, but it wasn't enough to win the war. "We need to get to the surface," Ava said, her voice steady but urgent. "We've held them off, but we're not out of this yet." The team nodded and quickly began to move toward the exit. As they left the control room and emerged into the hallway, they found more Zinker soldiers waiting for them. It was a trap. The enemy had anticipated their move. Ava and her team fought with everything they had, but the Zinker numbers were overwhelming. Ava knew they couldn't afford to be captured. They had to keep pushing forward or all would be lost. "We need to buy some time," Ava shouted. "We'll make our stand here." The squad spread out, taking positions and preparing for the next wave of attackers. It was clear now. The battle for Earth wasn't over, but Ava was determined that humanity would not give up without a fight. The war had just begun. The battle had become a storm, fast, violent, and unforgiving. Ava and her team were deep in enemy territory now, surrounded by Zinker soldiers on all sides. The sound of blasters and explosions filled the air, the ground beneath them shaking with every blast. Every corner they turned brought more enemies, more obstacles, and more chances for them to fall. But Ava West wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not after everything humanity had fought for. The weapon they had deployed had bought them time, but only just. The Zinker were regaining their composure, adapting quickly to the disruption the weapon had caused. It wouldn't be long before they regained control of their forces, and when that happened, Ava knew it would be over for them. The squad was spread out, each soldier taking cover behind crumbling walls, blasted vehicles, and shattered buildings. They fired their weapons in perfect sync, each shot a promise that they would fight until the very last breath. "Move, move," Ava shouted as she took a few careful steps forward, her pulse pounding in her ears. "We need to keep them off balance. We have to get to the command center." The command center, where the Zinker were controlling their invasion, was their final objective. If they could reach it and disable the Zinker's command network, the entire invasion might collapse. But the path to the command center was lined with danger. The Zinker had reinforced their defenses, and every inch of ground was contested. They had no choice but to press on. Ava ducked as an explosion tore through the street in front of them. The shockwave knocked her back, but she quickly recovered, signaling for her team to keep moving. "We're close, team. Stay sharp." Behind her, Sarah, the team's engineer, was checking her weapon, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Captain, we've got a problem," she said, her voice tight. "The Zinker are using some kind of jamming device. I can't get a signal through. We're cut off." Ava turned back to her team, her face hardening. "We don't need comms to finish this. We've made it this far together. Now, let's finish it." They advanced quickly, using every bit of training they had to move silently through the war-torn streets. The city was unrecognizable. Half of it was reduced to rubble, and the air was thick with smoke and dust. But even in the midst of this chaos, Ava and her team pressed on, determined to reach the heart of the invasion. When they reached the outskirts of the command center, they found the building heavily guarded. Zinker soldiers stood at every entrance, and their towering war machines were positioned on every corner. The team crouched behind a shattered wall, watching their every move. Ava pulled out a small device from her belt, a special EMP grenade they had developed back at the base. It was the only way to temporarily disable the Zinker war machines. "On my signal," she said quietly, her voice steady. "Sarah, you and Jake get to the east side and take out the war machines. The rest of us will provide cover." The team nodded, each member moving into position. Ava watched them go, her heart heavy with the knowledge that not all of them might make it back. But there was no other option. If they failed now, humanity would fall. "Now," Ava shouted. Sarah and Jake threw the EMP grenades in perfect unison, and the war machines went dark, their massive frames freezing in place. The Zinker soldiers around the command center, momentarily stunned by the loss of their heavy artillery, began to scatter, searching for the source of the attack. This was their chance. The team moved in, guns blazing. The Zinker soldiers, taken by surprise, struggled to respond in time. Ava fired rapidly, her shots precise, taking down any enemy who dared to approach. The squad was moving as one, a well-oiled machine, cutting through the remaining resistance like a blade through soft flesh. They breached the outer defenses, and as they neared the door to the command center, Ava could hear the frantic sounds of Zinker leaders barking orders, trying to regain control. The countdown to the weapon's final stage had begun, and if they didn't act fast, the Zinker would be able to initiate a final assault, one that could wipe out every last human on Earth. Ava looked at her team, her eyes locking with each of theirs. This is it. We're taking this place, for Earth, for all of us. They pushed forward, taking down the last line of defense and entering the command center. Inside, the space was lit with red emergency lights, and the walls were lined with alien technology. The Zinker commanders, standing near a massive control panel, turned in surprise as the human soldiers burst in. "Get down!" Ava shouted. The team dove into action, taking cover behind consoles and firing at the enemy. The Zinker commanders, larger and more menacing than their soldiers, retaliated with heavy fire. Their weapons were powerful, but the humans were faster and more coordinated. "Captain, I've got the terminal," Sarah shouted, rushing toward a large console at the center of the room. She began typing furiously, trying to hack into the Zinker system. Ava and the rest of the team provided cover, picking off any enemies that dared to approach Sarah. It felt like an eternity, the minutes stretching long as they fought to hold the line. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. One of the Zinker commanders charged forward, knocking over a large metal structure and sending it crashing toward Sarah. Ava's heart stopped as she saw the massive alien charge. Without thinking, she ran forward, pushing Sarah out of the way just as the Zinker commander swung a massive claw at her. The blow sent Ava flying across the room, pain exploding in her side. But she didn't stop. With a grunt, she scrambled to her feet, her vision blurry from the impact. The Zinker commander loomed over her, its dark eyes filled with rage. "You will die, human," the alien growled. Ava's mind raced. She had one shot. With a quick motion, she pulled a plasma grenade from her belt and hurled it at the Zinker commander's chest. The grenade landed with a thud and immediately began to beep. Ava didn't hesitate. She dove for cover as the grenade detonated, sending a shockwave through the room. The commander howled in pain, its body disintegrating in the explosion. Ava's ears rang, and her vision swam, but when the dust cleared, she saw that the remaining Zinker forces were retreating. Their command center had been disabled. Sarah looked up from the console, a triumphant smile on her face. "It's done, Captain. The Zinker command network is offline. They've lost their coordination. It's over." Ava staggered to her feet, clutching her side where the blow had struck her. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Humanity has won." But the fight wasn't over yet. The Zinker forces still outnumbered them across the planet, and humanity had to rebuild. Ava and her team had won the battle, but the war was far from finished. As they stood in the silent ruins of the command center, Ava looked out at her team. They were battered, bruised, and scarred, but they were alive. And that, she knew, was all that mattered.